Ford, the automaker announcing that it will be unveiling the all-electric F-150. It'll happen.
If you drive an F-150, Ford just made a decision that might make you furious. This morning, CEO Jim Farley announced a sweeping change to the F-150's future, one that erases decades of tradition with a single sentence. No more guessing, no more rumors. It's official, and it affects every current owner. Are older models about to be left behind? What happens to your truck's resale value now? And is this Ford's boldest move or its biggest mistake? The announcement heard round the industry. Ford didn't just update the F-150. They rewrote the rulebook and alienated the very people who built its legacy. On a humid Wednesday morning in Dearborn, Ford's CEO stepped onto a stage wrapped in blue and silver. He didn't smile, he didn't tease, he just said it outright. The future of the F-150 starts now, and it's electric, intelligent, and unstoppable. The words hit harder than expected. For millions of truck owners across America, it felt less like innovation and more like betrayal. For over 4 decades, the F-150 hasn't just been a bestseller, it's been a cultural monument. From job sites to farms, it symbolized strength, durability, and gasoline-fueled freedom. But with one speech, Farley signaled a pivot that many loyalists didn't ask for. This wasn't about adding a new model, it was about redefining the soul of the truck itself. The announcement included aggressive timelines, ambitious emission goals, and a fundamental shift in how the F-150 would be powered, maintained, and built moving forward. To some, it was visionary. To others, it was erasure. And within hours, social media lit up with both celebration and outrage. Ford had finally declared what many feared. The combustion era of its most iconic truck was officially on life support. What rolled onto that stage wasn't just a new F-150. It was a threat to everything that came before. A truck reborn inside the update? It doesn't growl, it hums. And somehow, it's faster. Beneath the headlines about legacy and politics lies something even more disruptive: the machine itself. The newly announced powertrain, available in hybrid and fully electric configurations, replaces decades of gasoline dominance with high-torque, low-noise precision. The all-electric variant delivers acceleration previously unthinkable in a full-size truck, launching from 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds. For some, it's a revelation. For others, it's heresy. The engineering team introduced a redesigned chassis optimized for battery weight distribution, giving the new F-150 a smoother ride and sharper handling. But perhaps most shocking was the software. Ford is installing over-the-air update capabilities, smart diagnostics, and adaptive torque mapping, all standard. No dealership visit needed, the truck literally updates itself. Then came the payload demonstration. Using electric torque, the updated F-150 towed over 10,000 pounds without breaking a sweat. Silent, seamless, almost surreal. Jim Farley called it a future-proof workhorse, but for drivers who grew up judging trucks by their rumble, it felt almost too sterile. Still, the performance figures don't lie. Faster, stronger, more efficient. And yet, the quiet power unnerves the faithful. The sounds, the smells, the vibrations, gone. Performance was just the teaser. The real drama started with a promise to clean up America's dirtiest vehicle. If this already feels bigger than just a truck, hit the like button so more people see what's really happening. And drop a comment below, especially if you're a Ford owner or know someone this might affect. Greener or weaker? The sustainability rift. What if your dream truck now runs on silence and guilt? Ford's pledge to become carbon neutral by 2050 isn't just a company goal, it's now embedded in the F-150 itself. The latest model isn't simply powerful, it's cleaner. Emissions reductions are front and center, with new materials sourced from recycled metals and interiors built with lower-impact synthetics. The result? A truck that's just as much about environmental values as utility. But that's where the cultural split deepens. Ford's core buyers, contractors, tradespeople, rural families aren't just buying performance, they're buying identity. And for many, sustainability feels like a political statement, not an engineering one. Owners have posted furious video responses online, mocking the changes and declaring loyalty to real engines. Forums once filled with upgrade tutorials are now battlegrounds for debates about green tech and what defines a truck. Farley insists that the F-150 must evolve to survive. "Our planet can't wait," he said during the announcement, "and neither can our customers." But that moral framing only fueled more backlash. Buyers don't want to feel shamed into change. They want to feel empowered by it. Greener technology sounds good until someone asks who's paying for it and what's getting lost in the swap. The hidden cost of progress? It's called an upgrade. But some F-150 owners say it feels more like a trade-off they never agreed to. Alongside the launch of the new model, Ford unveiled a controversial retrofit program aimed at converting older combustion F-150s into partially electrified vehicles. On paper, it's genius, updating loyal customers' existing trucks to match the new standards without forcing a full replacement. In reality, it's become a minefield of frustration and fear. The retrofits require custom parts, downtime, and in some cases, modifications that eliminate cherished features. One owner reported losing torque on steep inclines after installation. Another discovered incompatibilities with trailer systems. And then there's the price. While Ford offers subsidies for the conversion, the total cost, labor, downtime, and long-term maintenance can still reach 5 figures. For many working-class truck owners, that's more than an inconvenience. It's a deal-breaker. But it's not just performance that's at stake. It's trust. A vehicle handed down across generations suddenly becomes a puzzle of new parts and unfamiliar sounds. Some owners say the truck doesn't feel like mine anymore. That intangible connection, the sense of ownership, pride, tradition, isn't easily replicated through sustainability reports or sleek dashboards. Behind showroom windows, the real panic had already begun, and no one at corporate was picking up the phone. The Dealer Revolt. They weren't warned. They weren't trained. And now they're the front line for a truck they don't recognize. From Arizona to Alabama, Ford dealerships were caught flat-footed by the CEO's F-150 overhaul. Within days of the announcement, confused sales staff faced floods of questions they couldn't answer. Longtime customers asked whether their warranty would still apply after a retrofit. Others wanted to know why their brand-new truck now felt outdated. Ford corporate insisted training materials were en route, but many dealers claim they were left out of critical product briefings entirely. The transition to electric and hybrid models had been on the horizon, sure, but not like this, and not so suddenly. One dealer in Texas said it best. "We went to bed selling America's best truck and woke up needing to be software engineers." Inventory systems are in flux. Service departments lack the tools to handle battery diagnostics. Test drives for electric models are delayed due to shipping backlogs. And worst of all, many franchise owners now face retooling costs to meet Ford's Model E dealership standards. Costs they were not prepared for. While sales teams scrambled to explain the future, factories realized theirs might already be gone. When the supply chain snaps, the assembly line used to be predictable. Now it's a gamble. Ford's pivot to electric and hybrid powertrains didn't just shake the showrooms, it sent shockwaves through the company's vast and aging supplier network. For decades, thousands of parts manufacturers, many based in the American Midwest, have relied on internal combustion components: radiators, pistons, exhaust systems, fuel pumps. The new F-150 made much of that obsolete overnight. One longtime supplier based in Michigan, who built valve covers for 3 generations, said his phone hasn't rung since the announcement. Orders have dried up. Another parts manufacturer in Ohio laid off 50 workers within a week, citing sudden cancellations and uncertain direction from Ford's procurement team. These companies aren't just losing contracts, they're losing purpose. The disruption rippled beyond raw materials. Software suppliers suddenly found themselves thrust into the auto industry, unsure how to meet production demands. Assembly facilities dependent on decades-old workflows had to reverse engineer new standards overnight. The transition wasn't just about parts, it was about decoding a whole new industrial language at breakneck speed. Ford executives argue they're providing ample warning and transition support. But the scale and speed of this change are unmatched. Even suppliers willing to pivot to battery casings, wiring harnesses, or silicon components face steep retooling investments and limited technical guidance. As contracts vanish, small and mid-sized businesses collapse. Families dependent on auto part jobs are watching their livelihoods disintegrate. The industrial foundation that helped build Ford's empire is beginning to erode. Ford's parts may have snapped, but what broke next was trust. On assembly lines across the country, the union strikes back. This wasn't just about batteries. It was about betrayal. Inside the UAW headquarters in Detroit, outrage boiled over. Ford's announcement wasn't discussed. It was dissected. The union leadership saw the writing on the wall. Fewer moving parts meant fewer jobs. More software meant more automation. And the promised green future looked to them like a layoff in disguise. Strikes erupted at 2 regional plants within 72 hours of the retrofit program rollout. Workers held signs reading, "Batteries don't build communities," and "We power the future, not robots." Their demands weren't just about wages. They wanted binding commitments from Ford. No plant closures, job retraining guarantees, and profit sharing as EV sales ramp up. So far, Ford has offered vague reassurances, but little in writing. The tension deepened when news broke that Ford would be shifting certain EV manufacturing operations to joint ventures in Mexico and China. That hit like a punch to the chest. The idea that America's most iconic truck would be partially built abroad felt like a betrayal not just of workers, but of country. Union members described a sense of whiplash, one week celebrating a contract renewal, the next week facing redundancy. Veterans who spent decades mastering combustion engines were suddenly asked to retrain for diagnostics and lithium battery safety. Many felt expendable, discarded in the name of innovation that no one on the floor had voted for. Inside Ford, executives are calculating. They know the future is electric. But the price of transformation may be losing the trust of the very people who built the company's reputation. What started on picket lines turned into something far bigger, an election-year lightning rod too powerful. Capitol Hill goes to war. In an election year, the truck became a weapon, and Ford the target. Within days of the union unrest, lawmakers across the country seized on the story. Senators from Michigan and Ohio called for emergency hearings. Representatives from oil-producing states accused Ford of waging war on working-class Americans. Climate hawks, meanwhile, praised the company for its courage. Suddenly, the F-150 wasn't just a vehicle. It was a symbol in a political brawl over the soul of American industry. On cable news, clips of angry workers were spliced next to charts showing rising EV adoption. Farley was called to testify before a congressional subcommittee on automotive transition. The questions came fast and sharp. How many American jobs are you eliminating? Why move battery production offshore? What does this mean for our energy grid? The White House remained mostly silent, but leaked sources suggested behind-the-scenes concerns. Federal EV subsidies, once a political win, now carried unexpected backlash from core swing states. Ford's aggressive shift may have advanced the climate agenda, but it also handed its critics ammunition. While America argued about what the F-150 should be, its fiercest rivals got busy stealing its crown. Chevrolet's CounterStrike. Ford made a bet. Chevy made a move. Within 48 hours of Ford's electrification announcement, Chevrolet released a full-page ad in major newspapers across the Midwest. The headline read, "Still built for the job." There was no electric plug, no futuristic buzzwords, just a Silverado parked on a construction site, covered in mud. It wasn't subtle, it was surgical. Ram followed a day later with a campaign calling its trucks "Born to Haul, not Hibernate." The message was clear. Tradition still sells. Both brands leaned hard into their heritage. No sudden pivots, no Silicon Valley language. They framed themselves as the choice for Americans who didn't want their identity rewritten by climate policy or software updates. Their dealers doubled down with local radio spots and bonus rebates for trade-ins, specifically targeting older F-150 owners feeling alienated. Sales data began to shift within a week. Chevy dealerships in rural counties reported a 20% uptick in walk-ins. Ram announced a limited edition Diesel Forever line, which sold out in under 4 days. The truck war had reignited. And this time, Ford wasn't the one drawing first blood. Legacy competitors played to the crowd. Investors played with fire. Wall Street rewrites the script. The F-150 was once a sure thing. Now it's a question mark on every earnings call. The morning after Ford's electric update went public, analysts at two major investment banks downgraded the stock. The reasoning? Transition uncertainty. Investors weren't just worried about union unrest or dealer resistance. They were suddenly grappling with a deeper concern. What happens if Ford loses the very market it built? Institutional shareholders who once praised Ford's stability began asking hard questions. Could the Model E division offset the risk of alienating legacy buyers? Would battery supply constraints derail rollout timelines? Could the company survive a multi-quarter hit to its flagship product line? One hedge fund manager called the shift a reinvention without a safety net. Even longtime Ford bulls began diversifying into competitors with slower, steadier EV rollouts. The very identity that made Ford dependable now triggered concern, because fast change might impress the press, but it rarely comforts the markets. Ford's leadership held a last-minute investor call to reassure the market. They spoke of long-term vision, diversified platforms, and software-based revenue streams. But the numbers didn't lie. Shares dropped 9% in 48 hours. Options activity surged as traders bet on short-term volatility. Even long-term holders started hedging their positions. Meanwhile, other automakers enjoyed modest boosts. General Motors, Stellantis, even Toyota all saw minor upticks as Ford absorbed the market's skepticism. The message was loud and clear. Bold doesn't always mean bullish. Wall Street's doubts were nothing compared to the battle erupting behind Ford's closed doors. Culture war at Ford HQ. This wasn't just a product change. It was a civil war between generations of engineers. In one corner stood the veterans of Ford Blue, the legacy division responsible for everything combustion-based. In the other stood the rising stars of Model E, the company's electric and software-forward group. The two teams had coexisted under Farley's restructuring, but the F-150 update shattered that uneasy truce. Ford Blue engineers argued the redesign was rushed, the market misread, and the soul of the truck ignored. Model E leaders countered that survival demanded reinvention, and that clinging to tradition would kill the company. Meetings turned hostile. Slack channels lit up with internal leaks. Longtime designers threatened resignation. Younger talent, meanwhile, called for a clean break from legacy bias. Farley tried to play mediator. He spoke of one Ford, of shared purpose and long-term vision. But morale dipped. Department heads stopped speaking. The company's DNA, refined over more than 100 years, was fracturing under the pressure of its own transformation. The division ran deeper than engineering philosophy. Ford Blue saw their values, craftsmanship, tradition, real-world utility, being dismissed as relics. Model E viewed hesitation as cowardice. In between, middle managers were forced to pick sides, often choosing silence. What once felt like a family company now felt like a house divided by ideology. And then something unexpected happened. A rogue group of engineers drawn from both camps quietly broke off. Away from the politics, the boardrooms, and the battles, they got to work. Amid the chaos, one rebel team stopped fighting each other and quietly built the future everyone else forgot. The Skunkworks truck nobody saw coming. It wasn't just a truck, it was a reset button on everything. Deep inside a windowless section of Ford's engineering campus, a team of under-the-radar designers, coders, and engineers had spent the past 6 months building something no one asked for. But now, everyone needed. Codenamed Project Torchlight, the prototype was different from the official F-150 roadmap in nearly every way. It was smaller, lighter, cheaper, fully electric, yes, but not luxury EV. This was built for middle-income families, contractors, and first-time buyers. It used modular battery packs that could be swapped out at service centers instead of relying solely on charging networks. The interior was stripped down, practical, but still digitally smart. And the price? Targeted under $30,000, nearly half the projected cost of Ford's mass-market EV rollout plan. The team worked off hours, scavenged unused lab space, and reassembled old parts in new ways. Without executive oversight, they rediscovered the thrill of making something purely for the user, not for Wall Street. They interviewed tradespeople and designed from need, not branding. It was Ford's earliest spirit, reborn in exile. The project wasn't authorized. It wasn't funded. But after a presentation to a senior VP went viral internally, Farley himself asked for a demo. By the end of the drive, he was reportedly speechless. Project Torchlight proved something profound. Innovation wasn't dead at Ford. It had just been buried under bureaucracy and infighting. Now, it had a pulse, and maybe even a future. Ford found its secret weapon too late, because overseas, a far greater storm was already in motion. BYD and the foreign front. While Ford retooled, China invaded the market, quietly and quickly. As American headlines raged over retrofits, strikes, and falling stock prices, Chinese automaker BYD saw opportunity. With no legacy infrastructure to protect, they moved fast. Within weeks of Ford's electrification announcement, BYD unveiled an all-electric pickup targeting foreign markets, starting under $30,000 and boasting modular components tailor-made for global assembly. The numbers were terrifying. BYD already led China's EV sales and had just secured a manufacturing foothold in Southeast Asia. Now, they were negotiating fleet deals in Latin America and parts of Europe, markets where Ford was struggling to maintain presence. Their trucks were smaller, cheaper, and efficient enough for delivery fleets, utility companies, and emerging markets that had no emotional loyalty to Detroit. Unlike American automakers, BYD had no unions to negotiate with and no ICE legacy to unlearn. Their vertical supply chain allowed them to undercut prices while scaling faster. In countries where Ford was still finalizing EV partnerships, BYD had already signed deals. It wasn't just competition, it was asymmetrical warfare. Ford executives scrambled to track BYD's expanding influence. Industry analysts warned of a scenario where America cedes not just EV leadership, but the entire future of affordable utility vehicles. One former Ford strategist put it bluntly, "BYD doesn't want to beat us. They want to outlast us." And the scariest part? While Ford was battling its own history, BYD had already moved on to build the next one. Global competitors didn't just shift the market, they redrew the rules, forcing governments to choose sides: tariffs, treaties, and turbulence. The EV transition didn't just disrupt auto shows, it redrew global trade maps. As BYD and other non-American competitors expanded, governments scrambled to protect their domestic auto industries. Within 2 months of Ford's announcement, the European Union proposed emergency tariffs on low-cost Chinese electric vehicles, citing national security and market destabilization. The United States followed with a 25% tariff proposal, fast-tracked through the Senate with rare bipartisan support. Meanwhile, trade negotiations between North American Free Trade Agreement partners began to fray. Mexico, eager to attract battery and EV component factories, clashed with U.S. lawmakers worried about job offshoring. Canada, once a quiet partner, began renegotiating sourcing requirements for green subsidies attached to consumer EV purchases. Every treaty suddenly had a clause under review. Wall Street began hedging geopolitical risk. Multinationals warned of inflationary shocks from rising vehicle prices, and small automakers feared being collateral damage in a tariff war between giants. Global trade pacts once built on cooperation were now being torn up by battery nationalism. And no one wanted to be left holding the wrong contract. Inside Washington, the lines weren't just political, they were generational. Some lawmakers pushed for more investment in American innovation. Others argued for slowdowns and ICE protections. The battle wasn't just about trade, it was about time. How fast should America move, and at what cost? As Ford tried to maintain its pivot, it became clear the truck wasn't just a product anymore. It was a diplomatic weapon, a bargaining chip, and a symbol of whether globalism could survive a battery. Policy battles shaped headlines, but the real fallout played out in America's backyards and barns. The working class reckoning. You can't haul lumber with a laptop, and no one asked us first. That sentiment echoed across truck stops, job sites, and farm co-ops as the F-150 transformation hit everyday Americans. For contractors, plumbers, electricians, and ranchers, the new EV options brought more questions than answers. Could the batteries survive frigid winters? Would charging infrastructure be available on remote routes? How long would downtime last after retrofits? Even with Ford's subsidies and financing packages, retrofitting or replacing a work truck meant lost days, new costs, and unfamiliar tech. For multi-generational tradespeople, the learning curve felt disrespectful, like their expertise had expired overnight. Some traded in their trucks for rival brands, others clung to older combustion models, hoping to outlast the wave. In rural America, where internet speeds still lag behind urban centers, Ford's digital interface updates only widened the disconnect. "It's a truck, not a phone," one angry customer posted on a forum, capturing the resentment many felt. Beneath the technical specs and stock charts lived a deeper wound, one that said, "You changed what I love without asking why I loved it." Trucks may come and go, but the question of who we are and what we build is just getting started. If you've made it this far, you already know. We're not just covering auto news. We're following the power plays shaping your future. Subscribe now so you don't miss what happens next. A brand reborn or buried. Ford may survive, but it will never be the same. As the dust settles from what many now call the most disruptive moment in the company's history, the question isn't whether Ford will exist. It's what version of Ford will take its place. The company that once sold steel and horsepower now markets sustainability, software, and systems integration. For some, it's an inspiring transformation. For others, it's unrecognizable. Project Torchlight, the rogue engineering effort, is now being fast-tracked. Ford's executive team is quietly reorganizing production timelines to meet global pressure. Retooling factories, rethinking supply chains, and rebuilding trust with labor are no longer goals, they're necessities. Dealers are being retrained, internal departments are being merged, and customers are being re-educated, one interface at a time. The next 5 years will decide whether Ford becomes the defining name in 21st century transportation, or a cautionary tale of too much change, too fast. Its rivals are watching, investors are holding their breath, and families across America are waiting to see whether their next truck will still feel like theirs. And the next move? It belongs to us. The truck may be changing, but your voice still matters. Hit subscribe, stay alert, and don't let legacy decisions shape your future without a fight. Because what happens next isn't just Ford's move, it's yours. This story isn't over. And when it continues, you'll want to be the first to know.